Hello, students. We are on chapter 4 today, and the main topic is about ethics. And it's a very important time now that we think about ethics, not just in business, but all around us. And I know that a lot of you may have been touched by what's going on right now with the death of and killing of George Floyd. A very good friend of mine is a cousin of George Floyd. It really saddens me tremendously. Just so you know a little bit more about me, which I haven't discussed with you, and you haven't really had a chance to get to know me, but I am originally from Oakland. I was born and raised there. I come from an extremely diverse neighborhood down on Webster Street in Oakland. I went to Emerson, and I was the only white kid in school. Yeah, my whole class was pretty much mixed races, other than me, in the sense that I was the only white kid in class. And so I see what's happening. I feel for a lot of people when you stick out like a sore thumb, or you feel like you do, and it's hard to connect. So please know I'm here for you. I'm also what they call a teaching for equity teacher, which means if any of you feel like you are not getting what you need here, let me know. I'm here to support you. I'm here to help you get the education you came here for. Sometimes I get a little tongue twisted, so stick with me. I think things through and then all of a sudden I say something else. But I'm trying to make sure I do these videos well for you. So please bear with me. It's the first time I've taught fully online, just so you know. And so here we go. Let me share my screen with you for chapter 4. And there we are, chapter 4, demanding ethical and socially responsible behavior. Okay, the contents. Ethics is more than legality. Ethics begins with each of us. Managing businesses ethically and responsibly. Setting corporate ethical standards. Corporate social responsibility. And last, international ethics and social responsibility. The learning objectives. Explain why obeying the law is only the first step in behaving ethically. 2, ask the 3 questions you need to answer when faced with a potentially unethical situation. 3, describe management's role in setting ethical standards. 4, distinguish between compliance-based and integrity-based ethics codes, and list the 6 steps in setting up a corporate ethics code. 5, define corporate social responsibility and compare corporations' responsibilities to various stakeholders. And last, analyze the role of U.S. businesses in influencing ethical behavior and social responsibility in global markets. Okay, life after scandal. Scandals have definitely shaken up the business world, mostly the real estate market, mortgage and banking industries. And really, we saw this very, very severely in 2007. And it started with the fall of the banks in Iceland. And if you ever get the chance to watch the movie The Inside Job, I highly recommend it. It'll tell you how that occurred with the banking industries, but it was like a domino effect, because when the banks went under, the insurance world went under. That would be AIG, yes, AGI, and then what happened was then banks thought they could make things up with crooked real estate and loan paperwork, which people were totally unaware of, these 1% interest rates, and then what they call bulk payments. and people couldn't afford the bulk payments. It would be a 1%, and then they would have to pay maybe 50, 60, 100, $200,000 all in one payment. So a lot of the homes went into foreclosure. We saw a lot of people without living accommodations as a result of this. And it really changed how people looked at banking. Okay, so how do we restore trust in what we call the free market system? Do we punish those who have broken the law? How about making accounting records more transparent? And then consider what is ethical, not just what is legal. And with this, we have to think about integrity. Are we having integrity with what we are asking of people? So transparency has been number one, making sure that all business records, financial statements are available to be seen, and really need to think about those things. And then how are people punished for when they do breaking the law in business? Think about those things. Okay, as we move along here, you'll start to see how this builds into different new laws that were put into place, and how accounting principles, financial principles have changed. So ethics standards are fundamental. They're very basic. It's about standards of moral behavior. You know, what is your behavior about? Are we looking at right versus wrong, or what are we looking at? And there are a lot of people who like to push the limit, push it to the edge. And we're seeing that today. People who don't care what it means to do the right thing. So it's very true, few Americans have moral absolutes. Few. And as a result, that means they'll do whatever it takes to get ahead. So just an example, Volkswagen and ethics. Volkswagen paid U.S. Justice Department $4.3 billion to settle charges that the German auto giant cheated on emissions tests for clean diesel vehicles. Now, you need to really think about this, because if we're buying vehicles that are made outside the United States, they have a different standard than we do. The same as if you go to buy a vehicle that's made for the snow versus those that go to the beach. And that's a very important thing to think about, because snow vehicles have a different material underneath them to protect them from getting rusted from all the snow. Whereas vehicles that are in the sun and near water, which is different than snow, because they put salt on snow, and that's very damaging to vehicles. Where you don't have salt in windy and wet areas, it's a little different. So anyway, what happened was the environmental regulations, they attempted to bypass this, and so it cost the company more than $23 billion. Unbelievable, right? Thought they could get away with something, and it cost them what? $4.3 billion to $23 billion. Yes, almost 8 times as much. Okay. So when we look at basic moral values, there's the right and the wrong. So let's look at the right first. Having integrity, respect for human life, self-control, honesty, courage, and self-sacrifice. All these things, we hope our parents and people around us are teaching us these things as we are growing up. Now, I talk about that because some of these rights are, we are born with. We know them. We understand them. It's common sense thinking. But some people don't have that. And so some people need to learn them. And that's what, in good parenting, that comes about if good parents are doing these things. But then we have the wrong side of the coin, of course, the cheating, being a cowardiceness that goes along with bullying, being demeaning to people, insulting, and then general cruelty, just outright cruelty, hitting somebody, kicking somebody, stealing from them, just all wrong. So you have very black and white here, the right and the wrong, but we have more rights in the sense of values. And most people normally will implement them. But if they think they're not getting what they want, they may not. So we always have to think of circumstances with the right and the wrong. So in school, concept of plagiarizing. So we're talking about cheating, stealing somebody else's work, their materials, and using it with your name on it. And this is something that we see, it transfers in other places in people's lives. Now, if they're being dishonest somewhere else, they have a tendency to do this in other areas. It's not just one area. Here's the thing. If you don't know how to do something, ask for help. Don't cheat. It's so much easier to say, can you help me learn how to do this? So you don't take from somebody else. Now, if you're not very good with your vocabulary and your writings, now's the time to learn how to become a better writer. And so do some research. Learn how to use synonyms and antonyms in your spell check. And when you're writing, it will make you feel like a much better person because you actually put the effort and energy into making it yours. And so what the 3 questions were that were noted in the contents of today is my proposed action legal? Is it balanced? How will it make me feel about myself? And I always suggest, is there any integrity to this when I'm doing these things? Am I really being ethical about my behavior? So I would write these down, put them on a piece of note and put them in your wallet, your purse, whatever you carry. And think about that. Put it on your, text yourself this information and think about it when something comes up. You know, how am I going to walk through this? Am I going to feel good about what I'm doing when it's over? So again, plagiarism, and here's more of a another way is to think about it. So ask yourself the question, what are the possible consequences of copying someone else's materials? Now, you can think these things through, but this is the bottom line. If you get caught cheating in my class, if you have specifically copied somebody else's paper, we have some stages, what we do here at the school. We generally inform you that we know what you're doing, that you're plagiarizing somebody else. After you've been warned, you may next actually be asked not to be in the class. And then the next level may be that you may be asked to leave the school if you continue to do this. Now, if you do this at a job, it won't be as nice. It won't be as nice. If somebody says you're stealing their work and they report you and all your writing is their writing, or you take their ideas and put your name on it, it's the same thing. You're only hurting yourself. So be honest with yourself. If you don't know what to write about, find a way to learn how to add it with your own taste and flavor. All right, who said what? You guys know the telephone conversation where one person says one thing and they pass that information on to another person? Well, this is a lot of what we're talking about here. So you could, it's very important to reference and use citations so that when you say that you got this information from somebody, is exactly what was said, and that it was that person's information, not yours, or adding something to it that's not true. So you need to learn APA. I use APA for referencing and citing. Anytime you go to quote something, make sure, and that means you've actually copied it and you've taken it from something, that you give me the reference and cite it properly. Now, in the APA folder, in the files folder, you will find all kinds of examples and directions on how to do APA formatting. We're now in the seventh edition, actually. We just got through with the sixth. Seventh just came out in March. And so make sure that you're using the most current version. I have it, and I'm hoping that you will all adhere to following this process, because let's say, for instance, when you go to do your PowerPoint presentation for the team business project, you may be using photographs or quotes from different people. You need to reference them, and there will be a reference page required then. All right, so just remember to take the proper steps now, so that when you walk out of the door of your education, you'll have these things to use at your jobs and the rest of your life. You'll really appreciate knowing these things now. Okay, ethics start at the top. So, who is your manager? Who is your leader, and how do they behave? And it helps tremendously when you see a leader do good behavior, because then you want to follow that path, because that's the world you're going to be in. They set the standards for their employees. Very important. There needs to be trust between workers and managers. And if the manager doesn't feel like they can trust you, and there's going to be a problem. So they always like things based on fairness, honesty, openness, and moral integrity. Openness doesn't mean you pouring your heart out all over the place, but openness about what's going on with the job and your work. If you need help, or you see somebody else needs help, not so much tattletaling, but offering to help in that sense. Over ambitious goals and incentives. You know, it can get very uncomfortable, and a lot of times causes others to act unethically as a result of that. You know, it's good to have ambitions, but when you start to push things too much, people have a tendency to take major risks and go into the unethical behavior processes. And that can be very damaging to everybody. So what are the factors influencing managerial ethics? Let's start with the individuals, and we'll look at organizational, and then the environment, the job location, and the business. So individuals, definitely values. What is your work background? Do you have the training? What's your family status? And now, being single is not a bad thing. Being married is not a bad thing. It's nothing about that, but it has to do with the fact of how you are building relations with others and what you bring to the job. And then what's your personality like? It's not that every business expects to hire everyone with the same personality. That'd be insane. But we have all kinds of personalities that come to the job. And so what you bring shows us who you may be at the job. And that's important. If you come to the job already deciding you're going to rip them off or take advantage of somebody, you're not there for the right reasons. And you need to think about that as an individual going to a job. Then from the organizational side, top level philosophy, management philosophy is huge. And that comes from the mission statement and code of ethics. And we'll get into that more down the road here. But the management philosophy, how the management functions, if they expect people to pass their work along a certain workflow, being on time, getting work done on time, how they show up to work, how they dress, how they act in front of others. Do they introduce you to everyone? And this is something that's really important. How you are treated amongst others in front of others is very essential. You want it all to be in a healthy fashion. And then the job dimensions, and that involves the parameters and everything involved in that job. What does your job entail, your activities with others in that organization? Does it require you go to dinners, travel, how you need to interface with others around your job? Okay, here we are, the environment, competition. We will have competition within the environment because a lot of people want to climb that corporate ladder. Be careful, be careful. You can climb the corporate ladder and just doing your work and being positive and doing things that are beneficial for the business, always making suggestions to help the business. That has a lot to do with how the environment grows in a positive fashion. The economic standards are huge. Financially, if the business can afford people, are they being honest about how they're doing that work? And then the social cultural institutions involved with the environment. So we look at people at a job in a big way. We want to know who you are so we can work better with you. And so in doing that, that helps not so much flatten who we are as people, but it opens the door for understanding who you are and how you are at work. So all of that gets intermeshed, and everybody is responsible with this. If you have certain cultural needs, you need to let people know. If this environment doesn't work for you because of your culture, you need to say something. And we usually say go to human resources first. It all depends on what kind of business you're working within. They will have people identified for who you speak to, something to keep in mind. All right. Setting corporate ethical standards. So part of this involves what we call two different areas, the compliance-based ethic codes and the integrity-based ethic codes. Let me get a sip of water here. They are all written. They should be in a ethics binder in HR or the legal department. And what happens with these are the guidelines for preventing unlawful behavior. So we have to set standards. That means control on what's acceptable and what isn't, and then penalizing wrongdoers. Like there are certain businesses, there's zero tolerances for certain behavior, hitting somebody, just physically hurting someone, stalking somebody. All these kind of things can cause you to get released really fast. Maybe even have a lawsuit thrown on you. Things of that nature, stealing, outrightly stealing, embezzlement, fraud. Zero tolerance for these kind of behaviors. Calling people's names, using religious doings, sayings that are inappropriate on people to harm people. And you have to be thoughtful. So there's guidelines designed for every business. There are some also that are designed by the state of California for where we're here at now, insofar as what is acceptable in a business and what isn't. And every business is supposed to have those on their wall, usually in their HR office, or it can be found in an employee area. You have this big, huge sheet that lists all these things, important to look at. And then there's integrity-based. So this is about guiding values and building an environment that supports ethically sound behavior. Very simple, very basic. And expecting accountability with employees. Accountability is extremely important. So that means then if you do something that doesn't seem appropriate, you better have a very good reason for doing it, or you may be facing the consequences. So here's an example of a company's code of ethics. It's Hershey's, a little chocolate kiss down there on the left. And they have a very nice way of doing things. And so I want you to take some time and think this through. And I'm going to read it. We have each made a commitment to operate ethically and to lead with integrity. This commitment is embedded in the Hershey's values. Our Code of Ethical Business Conduct Code shows us how to uphold this commitment as we interact with the various groups that have a stake in our company's success. Our commitment to consumers. We maintain the trust consumers place in our brands, providing the best products on the market and adhering to honest marketing practices. Our commitment to the marketplace. We deal fairly with our business partners, competitors, and suppliers, acting ethically and upholding the law in everything we do. Our commitment to stockholders. We act honestly and transparently at all times, maintaining the trust our stockholders have placed in us. Excuse me. Last, our commitment to the global community. We comply with all global trade laws, protecting our natural resources and supporting the communities where we live, work, and do business. Next, we have features of compliance-based ethics code, and then features of integrity-based ethics code. So we look at the ideal, and in that way, how do we get outside standards, conforming to outside standards, laws and regulations? And there are some that are already established, which you can just implement, and then you have to show people how to do this. And those that have been chosen specifically for that business, I mentioned that previously. You always have to have an objective to avoid criminal misconduct. That's the bottom line. If you're not trying to avoid it, what are you trying to do? And so you want to enable, you want to empower responsible employee conduct. You want to get people to be excited about doing the right thing. And of course, I mentioned the legal department, lawyers. They're usually the ones who have helped design all this. Now, if you don't have lawyers, you don't really have to have lawyers actually to do this. You can design for that business whatever is appropriate for your business that you agree with is the best way to do things. It wouldn't hurt to have a lawyer, an employment lawyer, look it over for you, but it's important to consider. All right, methods. Education's number one. Whenever you're hiring people, you should be having an introductional period of time where all these things are written out and they see them, and then a lot of times you have them sign if they have read the code of ethics for that business, especially if somebody's in finance or they're handling customers in a very important manner where finances are involved. It's huge. They may not be the finance person, but let's say they're helping with contracts and they're discussing negotiations involved with them, product sales and purchasing, code of ethics there. Very important that the products that you're selling out of your industrial warehouse get to where you want them to go, and that they're picked up by other people who are supposed to get them. So this goes on down the line. And it's very important. So education, you want to reduce employee discretion, controls and penalties. You want to do whatever you can to have them feel good about their work, that's not something they're thinking about. They have to worry that they're doing something wrong or they may get in trouble. So I always consider that. What are the processes you're teaching your employees to do? So how do we improve U.S. business ethics? It is top management. It is the board of directors. It's the owner. It's your CEOs, not just your CEOs, all your C-class employees and corporations who initially should be adapting. And I like this word, unconditionally, and then supporting an explicit corporate code of ethic. So let's say you have 5 C-class people. your CEO, CFO, COO, CIT, CIS, all the way down the line, finance in there, HR, and they're the ones that you look up to. What are they doing? How are they doing it? And you can go to them and ask them, what's the right way to do this? Very important. And they should be what we call like a waterfall effect. They are doing it and you're going to do it. So it comes down the line. Let's see. And then there's those who definitely need training. There are some people who come from a place where they don't have any ethics, but they're good employees. And is that odd or what? Well, you know, they know how to show up, they know how to do some work, but they're not totally ethical people. And they don't get the big jobs. To be honest, they don't, because people know they had problems with their last jobs. So they're there to work. But the question is that what does it take to get them to turn to do the right things? Is it by watching other people who are in great need do the right things because they see how it works better for them? And to show them they don't have to steal or take from somebody else who's working really hard, maybe even instead to turn around to help them. You know, a lot of times a person does these things because they don't think they're going to get what they need. You're going to hear me say that a lot. Yes, it's a familiar saying with me. So bear with me with that. But instead of having them damage a situation, then they can talk with somebody, and we talk about here. Number 4, ethics office, where employees can come and talk anonymously about things. Now, the concept of whistleblowing. You know, a lot of people say, oh, that's a snitch, it's a rat, we don't want them around. Well, the truth of the matter is we need whistleblowers, yes. And it's not always about what somebody's doing, but a lot of times it's what somebody's not doing. And that's what whistleblowing is really about, especially in manufacturing and production. If you have equipment that is not being updated and fixed and could be damaging to other people, that's when whistleblowers are great to have around, because that means supervisors are not speaking up to get things changed. Maybe they're afraid to ask for money. But the thing is if you don't talk and you don't say something, more people could be harmed, not just emotionally, but physically. So you want to stop that from happening. The insurance fraud with AIG, or AGI, I keep getting it backwards, excuse me on that one. I think it's AIG, yeah. What happened was it was a woman who was doing some of the books who noticed that money was being put in accounts that didn't seem right. And we're not just talking small money. We're not just talking 5 or 10,000. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. They got moved around, and she finally said something to somebody. And she was tired of this thing where we talk about giving gifts, and the gift amounts were going to people who didn't need them, first off, because they were getting more clients, but the employees were suffering. They weren't getting the same pay to the level where they could live with a good wage. And here they're gifting all these CEO people or C-class people, and the employees were suffering. Wrong, wrong. Whistleblowing, good. Those people were ousted. Matter of fact, they're in prison today. I think one of them died of cancer while in prison. And they're never allowed to hold those kind of positions again for the ones who may be coming out of prison. But the thing is that it totally changed the design around of financial management, and the concept of SOX came about, Sarbanes-Oxley. And we'll talk about that more when we get into the financial and accounting that we'll be looking at. But here's where this is very important, because it involves outsiders, how it trickles down and affects them. And so they must be enforced. Code of ethics must be enforced. So I just talked about whistleblowing, actually, and here it's mentioned more. Always make sure that when you're going to file an allegation, it goes to the right agency. If you're working for a union, you have to make sure you follow the right steps, that you filed a complaint with your steward on the floor, and they do the right thing next, and we'll get more into union work down the road. But there are avenues that you have to make sure that you talk to the right people first. And also gather your information legally. Don't go around stealing information because you're doing just as bad. So you have to do some record keeping. Make sure things are dated. And you keep maybe even a journal of what you're learning, and dating it. And you have people to support you with this. If somebody else is seeing the same things you're seeing and you just happen to mention it at lunch, then you know you're not alone, that it's really going on. So we have here what's called corporate social responsibility, CSR. And we're talking about the welfare of the society, okay? How is a society being affected now? Right now, during the pandemic, we see one aspect, and then we see another aspect with the George Floyd killing. And so a lot of people are out of balance here with what's going on with our environment. Socially speaking, how are we being responsible? We're talking about unbanding the police departments. Now, it's actually not what that means, that you unband, you stop having the police departments functioning. It's a reduction of the funding of the police departments for different programs, so that that funding can go to people who need it. They're feeling that police are overpaid, the departments are overpaid, and so there's a lot of social programs that need funding to keep people off the streets, to help those who are homeless, those who have drug and alcohol problems, mental problems, that need more support groups. And so that funding can go there and help people instead of this circling problem that's going on. Okay, so then they say the proponents argue that businesses owe their existence to the societies they serve and cannot exist in societies that fail. And that's really not quite true, right? Right now we're watching this. We're watching a crumbling of old behaviors that aren't working, and establishment of clear views and values of how people want to be treated and deserve to be treated. And so we need to really be more open-hearted with people. And so that brings us to what's known as corporate philanthropy. So are we being charitable to others? Are we helping others? And I don't mean by carrying people, but by helping them. And what I mean by carrying them, that means not allowing them to learn on their own, but caring about them, to walk with them to learn. And a lot of times money will help. In a lot of ways, like we see a lot of educational programs being created. Of course, Oprah does this, the Gates do this, Mark with Facebook, Zuckerberg does this. This is more of your period of time. It used to be the Rockefellers and the Kennedys, the different families, the big families. Now it's a different level of families that are doing it. And then we have what's known as corporate social initiatives. And this is where we look at corporate philanthropy directed to the company's competencies. Are the competencies really what the business is about? And you have to make sure that the business is what it says it is. Is it ethical in that sense? It's just doing what it say they're doing, especially for the society around it, the environment. Again, corporate responsibility. Now we're talking about hiring minority workers and making sure we make safe products. So there's two things going on there. Always hiring people who are willing to work, and maybe they may not have the skills, maybe they're trainable, and then making safe products, which goes along with that. So that's quality control. We talk about that down the road. And then having policy. and how we look on social and political issues. Now, some companies will say they don't want employees to get involved with social and political issues based on who they are. Educators are told that they have to be careful, that they aren't supposed to go out and voice big political views about things where you may end up out in big rallies or preaching about things in education. The truth is in the matter is that a lot of educators speak up when the time is right to speak up. We actually are very, very concerned about our students and what we can help them with. So we have to be an example of what the right things to do are. And we wear those shoes and those hats and how you see us and how we act. And so it's, again, by example here. So what's the impacts, the positive impacts of companies? So we see this with Xerox. They give social service leave program. It's a great thing where they actually ask them to take a break. It could be even a month where they go and they do service work. They do different activities in different third world countries to help people. Here in the United States, they may go work and help build houses or hospitals. We've seen this done in Mexico. And it's a really good thing. It also helps build more integrity with people and being more humble. More and more companies encouraging employees to volunteer. There we go. While on company time, you get paid to volunteer. Now, I don't say that so you go out and do that. Not all companies will do that. But we see this with, let's say, for instance, with marathons going on to raise money for nonprofits, those in need. And there are businesses who put their name in front of these different programs for fundraising and supporting them, and they like their employees to participate in them. It's a good thing. And this is really important. And MBA students saying they take a lower salary so they can work for a socially responsible company. I'm with them. I don't want to go to work for somebody just to make a bunch of money to do unethical behavior to have that position. It's not worth it. Something to think about. Let's see here. Oops, let's go back to that page. Our customers, are we being responsible to them? And President Kennedy came out with the basic rights for consumers: the right to safety, the right to be informed, the right to choose, and the right to be heard. And you might think about this part of the First Amendment rights, right? Yes. Social customer contact, do's and don'ts. And this is just an example of using Twitter at business, what you do want to do with Twitter and what you don't want to do with Twitter. And this you need to really think about. Definitely engage followers in discussions relative to your industry. And then, as noted earlier, don't start political rants. Do think about your message before tweeting, always. And believe me, it's very important to delete tweets. Well, let me rephrase that. Deleted tweets can still be found. It's just like in Facebook. They have backup servers. Everything is saved. Once you write it, once it's a black and white, you can't get rid of it. So know that, okay? Do not write things impulsively, in other words. Always offer new content. Add what's been going on, so you build on to the next activities. Don't stay on one area too long. And definitely don't allow your account to like join an account and you want people to be attracted to you, you need to keep adding to it. And always keep business and personal separate. Do not put them together. You will regret that. And then make personal announcements via your company's Twitter account. Don't do that. Don't go to your business and say something about your personal life in the business, because now that will tarnish the business. It's not about the business. You need to keep them separate. How are you being responsible to customers? Continued. Do customers know about company social efforts? And how do they learn this? Media, social media, that's where we're at today. Bottom line way of communicating. And of course, this is pretty standard. Hopefully they're living up to their expectations as a business. So, responsibility to investors. Martha Stewart's the best example. Insider training. She went to jail for this. An ethical activity in which insiders use private company information to further their own fortunes or those of their family and friends. So if somebody shares something with you that they know that a business is going to sell a whole bunch of stock or buy a whole bunch of stock, or there's going to be a massive takeover of another business, that person sharing it with you, number one, is not supposed to do that. That's illegal because they're talking outside their circle. They're only supposed to talk about it inside the circle to protect the business. And that's where insider trading comes in. So somebody shares something with you and now you've got this information where you can buy a bunch of stock real cheap because prices are going to go down, and you can make a bunch of money on it. Or let's say you own stock in that business, and when they go to sell, you could sell high. And that's where you also can make a bunch of money. Well, that's where we see the line is drawn. That's not okay to do. So when you have these conversations, make sure you don't talk outside the business. And if somebody inside the business leaks that information, it's on them and the person who takes actions of buying on that information or selling on it. Now, when we look at this also, we have to look about your employees, not just investors, because employees can be considered investors. This is a little different. Creating jobs and always provide for upward mobility. You need to be able to let people know that they're coming to work for you and they're going to have a chance not to intentionally move up the social ladder, but to have a chance to raise their level of where they're at from when they started. So let's say they came in, they're in the mailroom, and their plan is to stay in the mailroom. Well, that's okay too. But let's say that isn't their plan, and that isn't the plan that HR has for you when they hired you, because the person who interviewed you said, you know what, I want you to start off in this department because we eventually would like you over here because you have the ability. We see that in you. We see that you're worth our investment in you by educating you to move upward. And in doing so, treating you with respect as this goes along. Very important. Goes along with salaries and benefits and how that has worked out for each individual. So as I mentioned, some of the insider training, here it is right here, Martha Stewart, right in the middle, 2004. How she received information. I'm going to skip this slide for now. Move on to more information about social responsibilities, and this is with employees. Employees are known for the individuals who create most fraud, and it costs about 5% of the annual revenue of U.S. businesses. Very common, very common. Whether it is misleading about how much something costs, requesting more money for something that somebody else wants, but they never get it. All kinds of things of fraud. It's amazing. You have disgruntled employees who will do behavior that's really underhanded. So they'll do things like blaming mistakes on others, not accepting responsibility, definitely manipulating budgets and expenses, and then making commitments they do not intend to do or they intend to ignore, in other words. Very bad. Hoarding resources. This is a very interesting one. Let's say they see there's a box, a ream of paper. Let's say they really only need one ream, but instead they take 3 or 4. Now it's kind of small, but what if they were doing that every month and other people weren't getting paper? That's hoarding. Okay, doing the minimum, just getting by, really a problem. And then making results look better than what they are. And we see people glorify things. We see them blow things out of perspective to get more attention for them. Don't do that, because it'll come back. Because when somebody does their investigation on something to make sure they're working with the right people, the right information, they may find out much quicker than you realize that it isn't as good as it looks. It's just an example here with Costco, that they have the best hourly retail wages. They start at the highest level. I think it's $18.50 an hour nationwide. That is a standard for Costco. When you start to work there, you get all kinds of benefits. It's very, very nice. And they are hourly retail, generally speaking. They do have employees that are hired as management, and that's totally different, of course. So why do you think Costco is so successful at keeping its employees? Something to think about. So when we look about how responsibility to society and the environment even further, most Americans, actually 1/3, receive their salaries from nonprofits, and they are dependent on funding from others. This happens a lot. And they are considered usually low-income workers when they become more dependent on others and nonprofits. So how do we keep them alive? Not everybody is socially capable of working with a lot of people or physically capable, and finding the right place for them in the right environment. And we have what's known as the green movement. When we started learning about how we needed to reevaluate climate change. And as a result of that, we're looking at minimizing the carbon footprint. Here in California, we stopped using coal for heat. It's not allowed. So how do we get energy for heat? And that means we have a lot of solar now. As you probably notice on the roofs of almost every brand new home that's built today, it is required now to have solar come with that house from the get-go. Older homes aren't required to have it. I'm not sure the date that actually started. I want to say it was really, here we are in 2020. I think that was really just 3-4 years ago when that was implemented. And it's good for solar people, and initially good for the homeowners down the road, because then they're not paying exorbitant heat bills or air conditioning bills based on where they're located. And we also talk about, with the carbon footprint, oil and how that is being managed. and environmental hazards with oils. Now, there's lots of opportunity for work, especially with solar right now. Going to work for refineries, still a good job. Union job, union, yeah, consider that. Green jobs. All right, social auditing. Very basic, a systematic evaluation of an organization's progress toward implementing socially responsible and responsive programs. So are those programs good programs? Are they worthwhile implementing and being part of the business? If they're not, why are you doing it? Okay, so you need to make sure. So we take a look at what's known as the 5 types of watchdogs. And we have a lot of watchdogs. Goes a little bit with whistleblowers, but watchdogs are those people who are very, very educated about circumstances, especially environmental. And then we, of course, have the political watchdogs. But the environmental watchdogs really know their information about what's going on in their specific environmental realm. So let's look at this for a moment. Socially conscious investors, of course, and then conscious research organizers, and of course, environmentalists and union officials, and then the customers. And you need to know all 5 of these and think it through for a moment. Each of these different groups of individuals have different environments, industries they're involved with. Union officials, it's not just the union, it's the kind of work the unions do. They're usually the trades. People usually being very physical and can be very damaging, and people can get injured pretty easily in those industries. I shouldn't say pretty easily, but injury can happen quicker than an office worker. And then, of course, just the customers are huge watchdogs in how products are created, quality, design, and they'll let you know. That's why there's a lot of websites that have a place for making comments about what's going on with products, and businesses want to know. They want to know. They want to hear what the customer's saying about what's going on. So don't ever hesitate to let a business know about a product or services, because they need to always be on top of that, the businesses, so they can grow and gain your trust with them. So corporate philanthropy, talked about that already, charitable donations. Let's see, corporate social initiatives. I thought we talked about this. I have to apologize. I guess this is a repeat here. And we have talked about all these. Okay, so moving on. Here we have a listing of the largest charities in the U.S. and United Way is number 1. 3.7 billion in donations. That's just amazing. And 86% that goes out to services. Task Force for Global Health, Feeding America, right now probably is closer to United Way. I hope I didn't say United Nations, United Way. The Salvation Army, definitely. I'm surprised I don't see the Red Cross in here, but the YMCA of the US, that's nationwide. They help people get shelter, they feed people, they provide clothing. It's a very good organization. St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, where you don't pay a penny. Bring your children in, and it's all funded by donations. Food for the Poor goes along with Feeding America. A little lower down there, that's a big difference at 2.1 billion to 1.1. Boys and Girls Club of America, helping kids out, need that. Catholic Charities USA, 931 million. Now we went from billions down to millions now. And then, of course, Goodwill Industries International. And they They actually have a business and they provide jobs for people. They do a lot for people. It's amazing, in the sense that you drop some clothing off or old furniture. That person who's at that door to meet you is probably homeless, may not have any money, and Goodwill provides them a way to make them more human and give them a job so they can feel like they're taking care of themselves. Very important work. Volunteering in the community. Discuss that pretty much. But listen, you really need to think about this here, okay? Do companies have responsibilities to the communities in which they operate beyond obeying the laws? What do you think? Do they? I think they do. I'm going to give you an example of why. Walmart is generally got their stores, both the small market and the large facilities, right next to where people live. And what Walmart has done is they come in and they plant trees. And planting trees does two things. It reduces noise from the trucks and it brings more oxygen to an area. Not just about them, it's about helping the community that they're affecting. So it's a very positive thing that's going on there. So, responsible environmental policies, goal of the Rainforest Action Network, very important. As an environmental activist group, and they help to show companies that it's possible to do well, to do good for others. So what they do is they conduct public campaigns designed to put consumer pressure on companies that refuse to adopt responsible environmental policies. So the Rainforest Action Network, wonderful, wonderful program. They believe every big organization should be doing something to adopt responsible environmental policies. So they go around to all of them and they encourage them to do this. Great organization to be involved with. Okay, so when we're talking about international, we want to know that you have socially responsible behavior that's going on with suppliers. And they want to know that when they order something, that's what they're going to get. It doesn't always happen, but the majority of the time it does. So what happened was in 1970s, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act criminalized the act of paying foreign businesses or government leaders in order to get business. Now, what happened is that people were like underhandedly paying people off or paying them to have them do business with them. In other words, we call it paying off people. It's an old term, but it's a very underhanded behavior. That's unethical, in other words. It's not allowed. So if another business hears that a business received monies so that somebody could do business with them, they will get penalized. Very, very bad to do. So it helps to be partners in the Organization of American States. And so they had the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption. And that's really what that's about, is corruption. We see it everywhere. It does exist, whether we like it or not, but it's how to keep it minimal and reduce or remove it. Ethical errors, how do we overcome them? Here's an example right here. Nike, low-wage nations operating in them where child labor is common. It's terrible. This does not look like a young minor, but she looks young. And what they did is they realized they needed to change that, and they did. And so can a successful firm overcome past ethical errors? I think they can. I think they can. And we've seen it happen. Sometimes businesses do things thinking they're doing the right thing at the time, and then come to learn as they move along that it wasn't a good idea. Not that they intentionally did it that way, thinking it was unethical, but they thought that they were doing the right thing at the time. This is how businesses learn. People learn. A lot of times we have to make mistakes to learn to do the right thing. Hopefully those mistakes won't be as costly as some other actions. So something to really consider. So here we are at the end. As usual at the end here, I remind you, if you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email, text, or show up at my Zoom office hours. Currently, they are on Mondays from 10 to 11 a.m. I am on Zoom. I actually already sent you all the ID for that meeting every Monday morning. So I look forward to meeting you in person in Zoom. So also, you might want to check with your peers or do some extra research about your question or this chapter. Remember, it's better to be ethical and have integrity than pay for it later on. And have a great day, and we'll see you in chapter 5.